Morning. Good to have you with us on this Monday. Good to have you back with us.
I know.
After
Thank you very much.
Trip to Colorado.
Yes, that's right. I know. Back at my alma mater. It was a great weekend. How was your weekend?
It was very nice,
yeah,
too.
There you go.
I'm Joe Fryer.
I'm Savannah Sellers. Thanks for joining us. We're going to get started with that ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is wrapped up meeting with Turkish leaders this morning, his latest stop on his diplomatic tour of the region.
It comes after Blinken made two unexpected stops over the weekend, one in Baghdad, the other in the West Bank. During those meetings, the Secretary of State sought to negotiate a temporary pause in fighting and also emphasize the importance of including Palestinian leaders in any talks about how to move past this war.
If you project forward to the future, what we all agree is that in defining that future, in shaping that future for Gaza, for the West Bank, and ultimately for a Palestinian state, Palestinian voices have to be at the center of that.
Israel continues to carry out intense airstrikes in Gaza, saying it wants to, quote, wipe Hamas off the map. Israeli military officials say troops have completely encircled Gaza City, severing the region in two, creating a northern and southern Gaza. Israeli forces are expected to enter Gaza City in force within the next 48 hours, escalating the situation on the ground. NBC News correspondent Jay Gray joins us now from Ashdod, Israel, with the latest. So, Jay, let's start with Secretary Blinken's surprise visit to the West Bank and to Baghdad. What were Blinken's goals in meeting with Palestinian and Iraqi Palestinian leaders, and what are we learning about his meeting today in Turkey?
Yeah, and let's start in the West Bank. Thanks, Joe. And the message was very clear. He was saying that Palestinians cannot be forcibly removed from Gaza, that they need to stay there and establish their place. He talked about ending some of the violence in the West Bank, concern over Palestinians who have been facing some extremist violence there from Israeli settlers, and spoke candidly about the Palestinian Authority having some control in a new government in Gaza. So trying to shape what things may look like after this war is over, though no one thinks we're anywhere close there. His stop in Baghdad, obviously, was to speak with U.S. troops on the ground there, survey the situation, and relay his concerns about violence spreading across that region and concerns about the violence actually turning into separate fronts in this war. So that was a part of the major discussion there. And then in Turkey, a place that has been more vocal about its opposition to this war than many other countries. They have said there's got to be an immediate ceasefire. They've ended all diplomatic relations with Israel. He was there to try and ease the tensions if possible and discuss and further push the idea that America has for these humanitarian pauses to allow more aid in, to allow more of those foreign nationals out. And so he was sharing that message as well. In an area, by the way, that wasn't real receptive to that message. There were protests leading into Blinken's visit. They didn't want to see him there.
Jay, let's talk about that joint statement overnight. Comes from 18 UN agencies and NGOs, non-governmental organizations, calling for an immediate ceasefire from Israel. What else did that statement say, and how is Israel responding to this?
Yeah, Israel has said repeatedly, and you talked about this, Joe, that they are going to continue this fight until Hamas is gone, that they are going to continue the strikes and continue to seek out and destroy, their words, Hamas, where they are. This report from the UN talked about the shock and horror. That's a part of the report. At the spiraling number of lives lost and torn apart, rockets traumatizing families is part of another section of this report. And they focused for a bit in this report on the lives lost when it comes to UN workers, more than in any other conflict in the history of the organization on the ground in Gaza. And then they did stress that there's got to be more aid moving in, a more steady supply of trucks bringing food, water, medicines, and medical supplies. And that's got to be established immediately. As you guys talked about in the intro to all of this, they closed it by saying enough is enough in Gaza.
And real quickly, Jay, we know in Gaza the bombings are still intensifying. The health ministry in the Hamas-controlled strip says at least 45 people were killed in a strike at the Al-Maghazi refugee camp. What do we know about that?
Well, the IDF says that they're still investigating that explosion, and they haven't really responded to how or why it's happened, though they continue to say that Hamas is hiding amongst civilians. They're using them as shields, and that's created some problems with their strategy. They have surrounded Gaza City, as you talked about, expect to be inside in the next 48 hours. And what they expect to find there is a lot of the operational structures, a lot of the facilities they are using to organize their fight against Israel, and they hope to eliminate those facilities as well as they move in.
And CIA Director William Burns also arriving in Israel today. All right, Jay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Let's bring in Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. He's a senior fellow and military expert at Defense Priorities and the host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube. Good morning. Thank you, as always, for joining us. So the Palestinian ambassador to the UK spoke out following Blinken's meeting with the Palestinian president. He called out the U.S. for not taking a strong enough stance for Palestinians. Let's listen to some of that.
We need to see the U.S. playing the role of an honest mediator, not adopting the Israeli narrative and the Israeli line, given how hysteric and, with the genocidal rhetoric coming out of Tel Aviv right now. We needed a grown-up in the room, and that is the U.S. Unfortunately, we haven't heard that, and that's why we did not come up with a joint statement.
So the U.S. has stood firm in its allyship with Israel. What do you make of these comments as Blinken meets with leaders in Turkey and in the region?
Well, certainly you have to look at the results so far. And I mean, we have to be honest, and U.S. diplomatic efforts have not really seemed to have affected much of the Israeli positions and the Israeli actions. Some of those you were just showing on the screen there a second ago of some of the carnage going on in Gaza just kind of reminds me of our operations in the Middle East. And we're, when we have to fight in terms of areas where there's lots of civilians, we have these much more surgical strikes, and they have collateral damage, but they are targeted. These are, you see entire sections of the city being leveled. And I think that the United States has been trying to get Israel to be more targeted and less, using a sledgehammer to get a fly, so to speak. And it doesn't seem that we've had much success. So you can certainly understand some of the positions of the Palestinian people, because they are now dying. Actually, over 10,000 is the number now, in addition to the UN support deaths. So you can understand why they would be feeling that way.
Also, Blinken is continuing to issue warnings, while he's on this trip to Iran, other forces supporting Hamas leaders. Over the weekend, I want to play a little bit of what he said about that.
It was very important to send a very clear message to anyone who might seek to take advantage of the conflict in Gaza to threaten our personnel here or anywhere else in the region. Don't do it. I made very clear that the attacks, the threats coming from militia that are aligned with Iran are totally unacceptable, and we will take every necessary step to protect our people.
So we're, of course, seeing Blinken, seeing the U.S. play this mediator role, but then while also having to make comments like that, trying to defend troops in the region and trying to stop this conflict from getting wider. How is that duality working?
Yeah, look, it is absolutely should be our overriding priority to prevent this war from escalating beyond the Gaza Strip. And that includes Hezbollah in the north, and it definitely includes Iran in the region, because once you have that, then war can take on a nature of its own. The issue is we've sent, of course, 2 aircraft carrier strike groups, now a nuclear-powered submarine, and, of course, lots of new air defense capabilities to try and keep our troops there safe. But we have to also consider, look, those troops are not doing anything but right now putting a big struggle for the United States to defend, because that could be the cause that draws us in if any of those troops are killed. I think we should consider the possibility of withdrawing those troops to more defensible positions out of the region so that we don't have to strike and get sucked into a war.
All right, Lieutenant Colonel Davis, thank you so much for joining us, as always.
In Washington, the battle over aid to Israel remains a contentious issue among lawmakers. Top House Republicans spent the weekend defending billions in proposed cuts to the IRS, part of a standalone Israel aid package. The House voted last week mostly along party lines to pass the bill, which does not include any funding for Ukraine in its ongoing war with Russia. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles joins us now. So, Ryan, the standalone House bill would provide more than $14 billion of aid to Israel. Senate Democrats say it has no chance of passing. If somehow it did, President Biden has said he would veto it. So what are we hearing now from the new House Speaker, Mike Johnson, about where things stand when it comes to all this aid overseas?
Well, Joe, he seems pretty insistent that any sort of funding package from Israel is going to for Israel, I should say, is going to have to be offset with spending cuts in other areas. He's targeted this plan to expand the number of IRS agents in order to collect taxes that the federal government needs. And that's something that senators have basically said that they're not interested in. So it's likely the Senate will pretty much ignore the House package and then just send back a package of their own that could include funding for other areas. But that will be the big question when it heads back to the House. How will Speaker Johnson respond? And he's already previewing how that may happen. Take a listen.
What they don't like is that in the House, we're trying to be good stewards of the taxpayers' resources. We offset that spending. Instead of printing new dollars or borrowing it from another nation to send over to fulfill our obligations and help our ally, we want to pay for it. What a concept. We're trying to change how Washington works. It's more important to protect Israel right now than it is to hire more IRS agents.
Now, it's important to point out that the Congressional Budget Office actually said that cutting those IRS agents would actually increase the deficit, not make it better. So that's something that's up for debate right now. But as it stands right now, Joe, it seems very unlikely that the bill that passed the House is the bill that will ultimately become law.
So, Ryan, we know the president, Senate Democrats, they say they support this broader $106 billion aid package, which would help both Israel and Ukraine, plus funding for U.S. border operations. I'm going to try to tap your expertise on Capitol Hill here. What do you think it's going to take to get something that both the House and the Senate will pass?
I really think the key, Joe, is going to be some sort of policy change as it relates to border security. That seems to be an area where you could get conservatives to get on board with something along those lines because it's something that they really care about. And while you've seen some House Republicans in particular be reluctant to continue funding for Ukraine, they are insistent that changes seriously happen along the southern border. And while the administration, Senate Democrats have been interested in funding increases for border security, it's the policy changes that conservatives really care about. And there could be an openness in the White House to policy changes as well. So that'll be the key negotiating tactic I think you'll see in the Senate in the coming weeks. Whether or not it's a package that can get enough support in the House is something that remains an open question.
All right. Ryan Noble, it's good to have you with us this morning. Thank you.
Well, former President Trump is set to take the stand today in the ongoing New York civil fraud trial against the Trump Organization.
Trump and members of his family are accused of committing fraud by inflating the value of their business assets to their advantage. They've pleaded not guilty in the case. New York Attorney General Letitia James is seeking $250 million in damages. NBC News Now legal analyst Angela Senadella joins us now with more on what we can expect. Not pleaded guilty there. Apologies. They've basically denied any wrongdoing in the case since this is not a criminal matter. What are you watching for as Trump takes the stand today? How can he help himself in his defense?
Well, look, I think it's unpredictable, as Trump on the stand always is, but I do think there's something that can help him. And as you said, he has already determined that there was liability. So there has been liability determined. The entire point of the trial is just to see how much liability, how much damages. Now, that directly relates to the loss of the victims. However much money the victims have lost should theoretically be however much money Donald Trump and his family should pay. But at this point, if the banks are the victims and they haven't lost money, he should focus on that. He should focus on the complicitness of the banks, how they agreed on these valuations.
Let's talk through a little bit about what we've actually seen happening in the courtroom, which has partially to do with this contentious sort of relationship between Trump and the judge here, and also this gag order actually now extended to the lawyers involved as well. Walk us through what we've seen so far and also the impact that could have as this goes on.
Well, remember, this is not a jury trial. The judge is the only person who will determine the extent of these damages and whether or not the business licenses could be lost forever. They could never do business in New York State again. So to that extent, he has launched these bombs at the judge, declaring that he is deranged, declaring that he is biased, and these gag orders are based on him allegedly attacking the staff verbally. So this is all related. There is one man determining his future, and that man is the one that he is enraged.
There's another person we're keeping an eye on later this week. We expect Ivanka Trump to testify. She had tried to at least get out of it, at least for now, but so far that hasn't worked for her. What can we expect when she takes the stand in this case?
We expect to see exactly what we saw with Donald Jr. and Eric Trump on the stand last week, which is it wasn't me, my role in the company, and hers was more marketing, did not directly have to do with any of the preparation of the financial statements. And so thus, we expect her to just say that she didn't know what was happening and that it was the accountants.
Angela Senadella, thank you so much.
Turning now to the war in Ukraine, NBC News has learned that U.S. and European officials have quietly broached the topic of peace negotiations with Ukraine's government. That's according to a current senior U.S. official and a former senior U.S. official. It comes after Ukraine's top general said the war had reached a stalemate. Meet the Press moderator Kristen Welker sat down with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky to discuss where he stands on the issue.
Hello there, Joe and Savannah. This week on Meet the Press, I spoke with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Here's what he had to say about NBC News reporting that officials from the U.S. and Europe have begun talking to the Ukrainian government about possible peace negotiations with Russia.
A lot of different voices around us. I heard a lot of different voices and emotions, and without any concretic and propositions, a lot of different things. But as for me, I don't have, for today, I don't have any relations with Russians. And they know my position. That is the position of my country. That is the position of our people. We don't want to make any dialogue with terrorists. And the President of the United States and Congress, bipartisan support, all these people, they know that I am not ready to speak with the terrorists because their word is nothing. Nothing. We can't trust terrorists because terrorists always come back. Always come back. Maybe that in some circles, maybe some countries, I'm sure that there are some countries on the level of intelligence or advisors of leaders, maybe they speak with Russia, maybe they, think how to manage everything. But till that moment that Russia staying on our territory, we can't manage it. They have to go out from our territory. Only after that, the world can switch on diplomacy.
You can see my full interview and a lot more at meetthepress.com. You can also get more Meet the Press here on NBC News Now every weekday at 4.
All right, Kristen Welker, thank you so much. Let's bring in Ambassador John Erbs for more on this. He is the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine and the senior director of the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center. Ambassador, always great to have you with us. Thank you very much. So in that interview, Zelensky, as we just heard part of this, pushed back on suggestions that Ukraine and Russia had reached a stalemate. But those remarks are in contrast with those made by the commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces last week, who essentially did say that we are at the stalemate. What do you think here? Are Ukraine and Russia at an impasse?
It's true that the Ukrainian counteroffensive did not do nearly as much as people were expecting, but frankly, they should not have been expecting them to do more because we did not arm them in a way that would enable that success. But point of fact, Ukraine has made small gains on land, and at sea, they've driven the Russian Black Sea Fleet out of Sevastopol. So they've had serious gains at sea. It's very unfortunate if in this leak that the United States and Europe is talking to Ukraine about negotiating.
Oh, it looks like the ambassador may have frozen on us. Unfortunately, if we got him, we'll continue with him. All right, looks like we have lost him. So we are going to get you a check on your Morning News Now forecast.
It's a soggy start to the week for many, from the Pacific Northwest all the way through the Midwest and Ohio River Valley. So let's get a check on your Morning News Now forecast.
Meteorologist Michelle Grossman is tracking the wet weather for us. Good morning, Michelle.
Absolutely. Hi there, guys. And we are looking pretty quiet this week. We do have a couple big weather stories, though. One being we have some soggy start out this work week, very Monday weather. As we look to the Pacific Northwest, we have some rain, some higher elevation snow. Even notice a little bit of lightning. That's sort of indicating how much energy this system has. It has its waves and waves of moisture that's moving on shore, and we're seeing that once again today. Then a little further to the east, we have some moisture moving through the northern plains, also the Great Lakes, the upper Midwest, some lightning there as well. And that will be the case as we go throughout today, too, because we're going to see some showers and thunderstorms in portions of the upper Midwest. Otherwise, look, we're pretty quiet. And then the next big story is we're looking at some pretty big November warmth. So let's start out with the rain first, because we're looking at heavy rain. This is radar right now. So you can see that rain falling. We have some brighter colors. That's telling us where that heavy rain is falling. The reds, the oranges, the yellows. So that's extending from Washington to Oregon to Northern California, back into portions of the Rockies. But this is much needed rain. So that's good news, even though it's kind of a damper on the start of the work week. It was a damper on the weekend as well. This is what we're looking at in terms of the story. We're looking at the system moving onshore, and then we're looking at heavy rain. We're looking at mountain snow. We're also looking at gusty winds. Winds could gust near 60 miles per hour at times as we go throughout today. So that's going to add sort of to that gloomy weather as we go throughout the day. Then the system is dissipating as it's moving into the Rockies. We're looking at a few scattered rain and snow showers lingering on Tuesday. And look at that snow. That's where we're seeing that blue. So that's a higher elevation snow. And we're looking at wind alerts, too, gusting up to 60 miles per hour. Where you see the blue here, that's where we're looking at wind advisories. So places like Portland, Eugene, Love Lake, down to Lake Tahoe, and also Las Vegas, we're looking at some wind advisories. Here's the rainfall totals. Again, we're expecting heavy rain once again, beneficial, but still kind of damper. We're looking at, especially along the coast here, a little bit further inland as we get towards the northern Rockies as well. Those brighter colors showing us where we're expecting the most rainfall. And this is through the next couple of days. Snowfall, looking at high amounts as well. That's the bright colors, the pinks, the purple, showing us where that heavy snow is falling. So lots throughout the higher ranges of the Cascade into portions of the northern Rockies as well. And then we have some rain further off to the east. So we're talking the northern plains, the Great Lakes. You could see some rain and even some snow in spots. We're looking at minor snow, but still looking at some cold weather up there. The rest of the story, we're looking at record warmth across the south into the eastern part of the nation. Back to you guys.
All right, Michelle Grossman, thank you so much.
Sure.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.